Imagine, if you can, struggling with not having enough, growing up in a really tough area, impoverished, struggling to make ends meet, and then having one of the providers for your family suddenly pass away, which leads to really big choices, such as stealing things so that you can sell those items just so you can bury that loved one. Well, today's guest did just that. And then he was faced with a decision: go to jail or join the military. Now he's a speaker, author, and coach, and he deals with adversity to leadership. Stay with me. Hey there, you're listening to the Living a Limitless Life podcast. I'm Sharon Hughes, and on this show, we talk about mastering your mindset, growing your faith, and becoming the leader you want to be, with tips, strategies, and interviews to help you create a life you love. I'm really glad you're here. So come on, let's go. Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here. I have a good friend that I have been courting online, and he finally gave in. This is going to be a treat. He is the host of the Adverse Effect podcast. He's the author of the Millennial Takeover. He is a coach, he's a speaker, and he likes to speak out, particularly on adversity to leadership. Give it up for Mr. Kenneth Cheadle. I'm so
Thank you
excited.
so much. It is a pleasure to be here, actually. And that's a very warm intro. So I really like that.
Well, hey, you made it easy on me. You made it
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah. So first of all, you served in the military, so I do want to thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Yeah. What branch were you in?
I was in the Army National Guard, which is people like, oh, that's like the reserves. Like the reserves these days, or back at the time when I first started, is pretty much like being active. Like I remember getting ready to graduate from basic training, and that was the day of 9/11. So we were in our class Bs or in our class As. That's like your dress up uniform. And as soon as that happened, it was like, hey, get out of that gear right now. And we had to get into a full battle round. So it was a very scary, life altering moment. Like, the drill sergeant was like, you're never going home. Like, oh my God. Like it was different, because like we can look back at it now and have that pleasantry of like, oh, well, it wasn't as bad as we thought. But at that time, we had never been attacked like that. So it was as bad as like, as everything that the drill sergeants were saying, even though it sounded scary, they were dead serious because we had never experienced that as a country. So they had no idea. Like, so when they said like, oh, you're never going home, we believed them like wholeheartedly.
Yeah. And you were a young man. How old were you when you went in?
I was 17 going into 18 or 8. Yeah, I think I was 17 or 18 going into, I just graduated from high school, and I actually didn't choose the military. The military chose, well, I would say it chose me, but in truth, honesty, like I chose the military just out of the sense of getting away from some of the environment I grew up in. Mm-hmm. I found myself in and out of trouble a lot. I was in some crazy amounts of trouble. I had robbed a Walmart and a couple other things to kind of help pay for my father's funeral because he had passed away. Mm-hmm. And, we grew up poor enough to where we didn't have any way to like bury my father. So it was like, 2 weeks gone by and he hadn't been buried. So just being young and dumb, resorted to drastic measures. And I found myself in jail before a judge who said, hey, you got to make a choice. And then I ended up choosing the military. And that's how I got into the military.
And what a shift. Isn't that amazing? Because that caused your entire life to completely pivot.
Yes, it did. It was definitely a pivotal moment in my life. Actually a needed moment too. Like my father passing away at the age of 16. I guess he passed away when I was 16. And at that point in time, I think that it's imperative that men have parents around, woman or a male, but especially at that age, another man. Like, because the times that come before that, it's not that, having your father around is like, like a bad deal, or I mean, like it's not that it's like null and void, because it's definitely like a good thing. But at that age of 16, these are where like the life lessons start to flow in. You really need some guidance. And at that time is when my father passed away. So, from him passing away, I had to step into like a more of a man figure in my
Mm-hmm.
household because I had my three sisters and my mom and stuff
Mm.
like that. So not knowing exactly how to do that, because at 16, you
Right.
don't think your dad's going to pass away. So,
Right.
there's just a lot of lessons that at that age that I really needed. I really needed some guidance, some advice. I didn't have it. And because I didn't have it, it led me down the path of doing things the best way that I knew how, which really, as you see, telling my story, going to jail or whatnot, it wasn't very good. So the military helped correct some of those things as it relates to giving me a little bit more structure and organization, but it didn't like fully change me. I mean, you are who you are. And
Mm-hmm.
at that time, who I was very deep rooted into the environment that I grew up in. So.
Right. Oh gosh, I think you and I could spend a weekend talking about all of those things. What I really want to know is what prompted you to start your podcast? I mean, the
Oh,
adverse effect is that's such a statement just in the title.
yeah. What made me start the adverse effect was I had gotten to a point to where, I got out of college and I had struggled throughout my corporate America time just due to the environment that I grew up in. And being in the military is very direct and aggressive type backgrounds where corporate America is very passive aggressive. So
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out how to fit in that world was really a challenge for me. Um, and I ended up writing a book, which was really good. And I did that to give back to people that had came from the same environments, or were just like first generational career professionals and
Mm-hmm.
had no understanding of how to navigate in corporate America or different things like that. So I started sharing that with people, and I started doing a lot of life coaching at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I got to a point where life coaching and career coaching had just become so exhausting. Not to say that I didn't love doing it. I loved doing it for the 3 years that I was
Mm-hmm.
fully engaged in it. However, it became such a tax and burden in some regards. So I started the adverse effect because I believe that there were still more stories out there that wasn't just like mine, but had different varieties and just different backgrounds of how these people have gone through different day-to-day adversities and how they've gone on to be successful in their lives or
Mm-hmm.
gone on to find some normalcy in their lives. So I created the
Mm-hmm.
podcast to not only share my story, but to be able to talk to other people and allow them to share their story so that they
Mm-hmm.
could go forth and give back to people something that would help them along. Because oftentimes we think that we're the only one that's dealing with an adversity. We think
Right.
that we are the only person that has experienced something. And when you start to hear somebody else going through something that you have been through or walking through, um,
Mm-hmm.
it's a liberating moment. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, well, cool. If this person did this and they got through it, I can. Or how did they get through this? Maybe the way that I figured this out won't be the exact way, but this right here gives me a start that I didn't have before. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I referenced it to I think about the guy that ran the first mile and he did like in 2 minutes or something like that. And the old knowledge was perceived that if you ran a mile in under 2 minutes, that your heart would explode or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So this guy dreamed about doing this forever, you know what I mean? And we're, months leading up to this big moment to where he got ready to do it. And then he believed that he could do it, he manifested in his mind, he ended up doing it. Now, his story is good, but the best part to me is the fact that after he did it, there were like three or four other people that did it within the same month. And it was
Mm-hmm.
that they needed to see somebody else do it. And then it was like,
Mm.
oh, I can do it too. So
Right.
when I think about, these adversities that we all go through, it's okay, if I hear somebody else, on my podcast or that I'm interviewing and they share a story, somebody's like, oh, they got through that. I can get through that too. So I take
Yeah.
that same mind frame and that
Yeah.
mental concept from, that sprinter way back when, and bring that same psychology to the podcast as well.
Right. Oh, that's so powerful. Yeah. Your podcast, like, it shakes things up. What
Yeah.
I love about your podcast is just the diversity of people that you bring on, and that
Hmm.
it's really a judgment-free zone. Like, you just kinda you
Most
let
definitely.
people just be who they are and tell their story.
Oh, most definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so like I've listened to so I'm a big fan of so many different podcasts, but one of the things I try to do with this podcast, everybody's like, well, you don't talk as much as you would normally talk. Like you really let people tell their story. And
Mhm.
I think that's important. Like I kind of we talked about Christianity before. I like the pastor approach where he says most pastors, in the Christian faith, they say, and right before they get ready to do their sermon, they say, please hide me or shield me behind the cross so people don't see me, the pastor, they actually see
Yeah.
Jesus Christ. So my thing
Yeah.
is not to come to the show just to see me speak and talk or whatever. I
Mhm.
have other platforms for that. I really want you to come here and hear this message that this person is saying. So how can I draw that message out from the person, and how can I give it to the listeners so that they can receive it well? So
That's just such a beautiful picture of your own humility. Like you're very, very humble. You are.
thanks.
And I just know that because, well, since we've been talking on Instagram for a while now, I just feel like I
Mhm.
know you. You know,
Yeah.
you've opened up quite a bit and you just share things. And I really appreciate that. I find that that's a piece that's missing for men. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like women are screaming, like, we want our men to be vulnerable and open up and share with us. We want to know the you underneath it all. But our
Sure.
society is saying, be a man, suck it up, don't cry, don't show your feelings. Like, do you see that?
Yeah, I most definitely think we actually have conversations about this. I think we're actually in a transition period from that state of mind. It's a
Mhm.
very barbaric, barley type thing. And I get it. I mean, I get it. Like, you want your man to be a manly man and all this other good jazz. But what you do from that is you strike away from what's true about the human experience, about what the person
Mhm.
really is. Like, yes, I am a very masculine, manly man. You know what I mean? I'm
Mhm.
very broadly, but at the same time, I got feelings and I have emotions and they need to be expressed. And because I do so doesn't mean that I'm less of a man. Like I remember, this is a funny for the listeners. I remember way back when, and it's kind of off subject, but it just goes to the tradition of society, right? So I remember way back when I had this lady I was dating at the time, and she's like, "I'm going to go get a pedicure. You want to come?" I'm like, "Oh no, that's not manly. That's not what men do." Blah, blah, blah. So I went on this whole tangent, saying for a couple of years, and then one day I was looking at P Diddy, Puff Daddy, for all of you back in the day. And he had this show back in the day on MTV called Making It Band. And on Making It Band, right? So on this show, this man was getting a pedicure, like on the show. Like he was talking stuff to the kids or whatever, he was asking to get a pedicure at the same time. I'm like, huh, I can get a pedicure as a man? Like, I had to see, again, it goes back to that whole thought process. I had to see
Mhm.
somebody else do this. And then I was like, okay, I can do this, you know what I mean? And then, before long, my friends were like, oh, I can't believe you're going to go do this and going to go do that. But it's because they had never seen what I had saw. And I was like, hey, man, I'm doing
Right.
this because, and back at the time, I'm like, well, P. Diddy did it, but now I do it because this is something that I really wanted to do. I wanted to do it back then. I just felt like I needed permission as a man because this wasn't what society deemed was masculine. And I come to see like, no, that's not true. First off, as a man, you should be well kept. Nobody wants to deal with an unkept man. I mean, so that means that they're not barley enough. That's personal. I guess it's up to the discretion of the person you're with. But for me, I like to be a kept man, and that's not often looked at as masculine. But I'm very masculine. You know what I mean? But we try to take things and coin them as not being a man, or if you cry, if you do this, these things aren't manly, and those are all false narratives that have been built up by a society of old, and we just don't live in that world anymore. I'm not sure we ever lived in that world, but I know for sure we don't live in that world now. So
Well, P. Diddy, he listens to my show. We're tight. So just a little
nice.
shout out. Hey, thank you, because now Kenneth Cheadle is getting pedicures. I'm just
Right?
kidding you. It's April Fool's, so April Fool's. But you know what? I agree with what you said about false narratives. And with the work that I do, I find that the people I come in contact with, either through the corporate training that I've done or the coaching I do with women, they've all got false narratives running in their head.
Oh yeah, most
And it's
definitely.
such like opposite ends of the spectrum too. It
Most definitely.
yeah. Yeah. So, what have you found is a really good way to overcome those false narratives, aside from
Oh
seeing that
man.
P. Diddy gets a pedicure?
Oh well, I think the first thing is self-discovery, right? Because we
Yeah.
live in a society where we've been told, like, so let's back all the way up. We've been told, and this is just my theory, maybe other
Okay.
people subscribe to it or whatnot, but I feel like we've been told who to be for a very long time. And we're
Yes.
now in a stage, in a phase, in a sector, in a time in life where that is no longer the truth, where we have to be told who we are. Like, we all done we and what I mean by being told, that means doing things traditionally. I'm doing this
Hmm.
because this is what tradition and president has said before, what my people did before me, this is what everybody
Hmm.
else did, regardless if it feels right or whatever. I'm doing this because they did it. Well,
Mm.
I just don't think that we're in that space anymore. And for
Yeah.
me, um, I try to live organically more to who I am
Hmm.
and the space I am. I recognize what truth is and what truth isn't. So I'm very exploratory about figuring that piece of myself out. But also, uh, I just I don't subscribe to the narrative. Like, you have to be this way. Well, it's the question of, well, why do I have to be this way? Like,
Yeah.
who said this? Who came up
Right.
with this? And so you start to peel back the onion. If you ask why,
Hmm.
you'll start to peel back a lot of the onions. And then when you get to the center, you're like, oh, I've been thinking about it this way because this is what I've been told. But now that I've looked back and read, actually this person didn't even say that. They didn't even say. I've been thinking this was somebody else that said it. So there's a lot of tradition debunking that we have to do as a society to make sure that what was done in tradition is actually factual, or
Right.
is it just something that someone came up with at the time? And is even if it is, factual, is it true to you?
Hmm.
Is it true to who you are as a person? So
Hmm.
self discovery has had me on a in a space where I'm starting to find myself and I'm figuring out, like, I remember first going out with my friends back when we were younger, and we used to all drink Long Island iced teas.
I remember those.
Yeah, exactly. Back when I could handle it. I'm too old to do it. But back when we were doing those, I did that in a sense because, that's what we always did. One day
Right.
I found myself discovering myself. I'm like, do you even like this? Do you even like these Long Island iced teas? I'm like, no, you don't. Actually, what do you like? So you find, like,
Mm.
okay, well, let me go figure out what this is. Or, and then when somebody says, like, oh, you should be in this relationship, in this marriage or whatever, because whatever this tradition says, regardless of if it makes you uncomfortable, if it's abusive, or maybe you got into it at a young age and you just didn't develop and see the things that you see now, but you
Mhm.
just stay with it no matter the case. Like, yeah, we lived in a time where that was the case. We don't live in that
Mhm.
time now. And I'm not avidly promoting divorce, whatever, because it's at this time it's too rampant. I think people get into things and they leave way too fast.
Mhm.
So I'm not advocating that, but I am advocating the sense of don't stay in the situation, whether that be a relationship, a career, a place in your life,
Mhm.
whatever, because of some traditional thing or some body that you can't even fact check to see, if that's true about yourself. And you build a life in a prison at sometimes around those traditions, and you're not able to live a full life. I think that's crazy. But again, we didn't know these things that we know now. So now we're, as more evidence presents itself and more things start to come forth, it's on us as a people to make the right choices for us as individuals and our families, and not do things just because this is what the masses are doing. What do you think is right and true for you as an individual and in your family?
Yeah, I think that's a really valuable set of questions right there.
Yeah.
Yeah, so before we pushed the record button, we chatted just a little bit and we talked about just so briefly about faith, just so
Hmm.
briefly. And you said, "Well, you don't want to disrupt anybody." And I said, "Oh, I'm such a disruptor. I'm such a disruptor." But I would like to know what
Hmm.
what has shaped your faith? I think since we're just going to expose people to ask the questions of why. Why do I think that? Share.
Hmm.
Would you mind sharing what you believe about faith where you're at now? Because I like what you told me earlier before we started recording, and I completely agreed with you.
Okay. Well,
I'm
see,
putting you
now
on
I'm
the
about to
spot a little bit,
right
but
and
it was
see what
good.
I
It was
right see and what I say, mate, right now, you might like I thought I agreed with him. So disclosure to the people, she hasn't heard everything. I think just in
I
case
probably
back
haven't heard
right.
everything.
So like for me, like I grew up in the church. I grew up starting as early as 3 months was the first time I went to a church that I currently still am a member of.
Mhm.
Now throughout this time, and this is not true for everybody, but this is true for me, and I think it's true for a lot more people than what we think. Um, I had no idea a lot of things. So I do like they call it blind faith. People
Right.
always say you gotta walk in faith blindly. That's cool. I'm with that, whatever. So I went down that path of believing everything that I was told, good, bad, and indifferent, whether it was
Hmm.
from my parents, from my grandmother, my grandfather, the pastor, whatever, as it relates to religion. Once they told me, hey, that was the law.
Yeah.
No investigation on my side. I ended up going off to college, and going off to college, I started, because of where I grew up at and being so active in the church, I'm like, I'm gonna take all these religion courses. And I started to find out different narratives and different things other than what I knew to be true. That was based in history, science, and facts. I was like, oh, this is not necessarily what I thought, and it brought me to a space where I was able to question things that I was told back when I was younger. Like, hey, don't don't question God. You just gotta believe. And um, that answer wasn't good enough for me. I needed to
Hmm.
know why and more. And
Hmm.
in doing so, I found myself where I would say that I have a lot of Christian foundations,
Hmm.
but I would say that I'm not very religious in the sense of that religion guides me. I can see, as being a soldier and being a person that's traveled the world a few
Hmm.
times, I can see where religion can be very disruptive, as the sense that it can divide people.
Mm,
So I've
yeah.
walked to a space where I'm very much a believer in God. Like I wouldn't be where I'm at right now in my life. I wouldn't have all these things I have. I wouldn't have There's so many moments when my life could have been taken from me, whether there was the environment that I grew up in, or the time that I served in the military, the time that I served overseas as a contractor, whatnot, that I knew that there was a presence bigger than mine's there that saved my life. So, not
Mm,
discrediting God by any stretch of the imagination, but I will say this: there are two type of people to me as it relates to religion, um, and I've kind of found myself like identifying this by looking at my past and looking at where
mhm.
I'm at right now. And when I first started to go to church, I would consider myself what I would call a grocery store Christian. And that
Mm.
means that when you walk into the store, you go into the produce area, you go to apples, tomatoes, bell pepper, whatever the case may be there, you just pick it up and you put it in the basket, in the bag, like
Mhm.
I'm ready to go. Because in your mind, you're like, they wouldn't put this here if it wasn't good for me. They wouldn't
Yeah.
have it here if it wasn't something I should have, right?
Okay, I'm
But if you ever
tracking with you.
watched, right, but if you ever watched a farmer, a person that actually forms food, go into a store, they're very selective about the produce that they pick up. Like,
Mm,
they look
okay.
at it, they analyze it, like, oh, okay, well, this is not a really good tomato. I mean, I know it's here, but that's not the one I'm looking for. Let me go
Mhm.
find this is the one I'm looking for, because they understand what they're looking for. So it goes to the space to where I say that a grocery store Christian is just going to take whatever pastor, mom, mother, grandmother, or whoever has told them.
Mhm.
No investigation. They just like, well, they wouldn't tell me if it wasn't true because they love me or they're around me.
Mhm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Whereas a former Christian is a person that's like, okay, well, I really appreciate you telling me that information. Let me go investigate this myself as well, so I
Mhm.
can see if I can come up
Mhm.
with something similar or find out what's true for me, right?
Mhm.
And I think we have to get more to the latter than we are to the former. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I really like the way that you explained that. It's easy for people to grasp because when it comes to faith and what people believe, like you're right, they're so divided. And I want to be a disruptor in the sense that I just really want to walk in grace and mercy. And I
Mm-hmm.
want people to know that they matter because I actually believe that is truly what the gospel is that they matter, that you are enough as you are, that you have a
Exactly.
purpose, that you're valid and valued. And the message
Exactly.
got skewed somewhere in there. So I think that's the
Yeah.
difference between religion and relationship.
Right. Like,
Yeah.
being able to travel around the world a couple of times. Like, I have friends that live in Afghanistan. I have friends that
Mhm.
live in China. I have friends in Korea. I have friends all over the world, just
Mhm.
traveling. And even if I wasn't traveling, just the fact that I have social media and my engagement through my social media,
Right.
I have friends throughout the world, whether they be in Korea, China, Afghanistan, Germany, Africa, like just different places I've been. And even if I didn't travel to those spaces, the fact that we utilize social media has also connected me with so many different people
Right.
across the world.
Yeah.
And we've built genuine relationships, genuine
Mhm.
friendships. And, I grew up, and this is not true for everyone, so I'm not putting this out there, but for me, I grew up with the narrative that if you wasn't Christian, you're going to hell. And
Mhm.
I know that some of the people that I have friendships with, just based on the sheer fact of where they were born, their the chances of them bumping across Christianity may be slim to none. You know what I'm saying? So there's no way I can be like, okay, well, you're going to hell just because you've never seen it, blah, 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 or you haven't been introduced to it. It's like, well, I can't believe, I don't believe that God exists, not a loving God. You know what I'm saying? So,
Yeah.
and then it's because you get a chance to have more of a human experience. Now, if I was just in my hometown in Kansas City, Missouri, and I never moved outside that space, and all I ever heard was that narrative growing up, and I never got outside that zone, that's exactly what I would believe because that's my experience. That's all I have. But
Right.
thankfully, God has allowed me to travel throughout the world and meet different people. And that has totally debunked my thought process on that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. You just said something that's, again, so pivotal, that because that was your experience, then that's what you would believe. Don't you
Mm-hmm.
think that that just applies like universally to just life? Like if this is all you know and this is all you experience, whatever it was, then that's just what you're going to believe is that's the way that life is because it's
Oh,
kind of
most
putting life
definitely.
in a box.
Most
Yeah.
definitely. I
Yeah.
think that I think that we all have to get to a space. I call it range. I tell people like, oh, you got to get more range. And what I
Mm,
mean by range is that you can't just be in this one spot, in this one focus, in this one environment, because that's not truly life. That's only life based on what you know. And to find truth in life, you have to get outside of the life that you know so that you can debunk some of the prejudices,
yeah.
the belief system that you had only based on the world that you knew. Um,
Yeah.
so getting outside of those spaces definitely challenges that because you're like, oh well, I thought this to be true, but it's not because I now have this experience or I now seen something totally different. Um, and I think that like one of the big shaping moments for me is where I grew up in an environment, what we like to call the hood or urban core or whatever. It was really a struggle, and it was only the fact that I had gotten a job with one of the sergeants that I used to be in the unit with. He owned a window cleaning business, and it was out in this really ritzy areas called like Black Bob Road in Kansas City, and it's like where the well-to-do kind of stay. And
Mhm.
I never was out in that area, so I grew up in a very impoverished area. So when I got out there, I was just taken back, like, wow, I can't believe this. Like, where did you guys get all this stuff? And how do you have grass with no crabgrass? And how do you get houses this big? And I'm talking to these people, these owners that were cleaning the houses on against my sergeant's, his permission. He told me not to do this, but I did it anyway. And I'm like, well, what do you do for a living? They're like, oh, I'm a
Mhm.
manager at Target, or I work for this healthcare facility, or I work for this firm. I'm like, oh,
Mhm.
so what it did is it made them become everyday people to me. Up until that point, I
Mhm.
believed that I had to become an entertainer or a ball player or a drug dealer or something to amass this type of success. And
Right.
what I come to find out is like, oh, you can be an everyday Joe and get this. But that wasn't a reality for me. And I had to go
Right.
see that to be like, oh, this is possible for me. So I had achieved a lot of what I had saw by the age of 25, just because I saw it. So I was,
Yeah.
when people consider the American dream, the house, the picket fence, all that good stuff, good dog, I got that at 25 years old because I was chasing it. But up to that point, I didn't know what it looked like. I had to see
Mhm.
somebody show me what that was and then
Mhm.
explain to me like, oh, this is what I do. I'm like, oh, you're just me. You're just regular. Cool. I can do
Yeah.
this. And then it
Yeah.
gave me the empowerment to go off and do things on my own, and I never looked back from there. So
I love that. That's so powerful. That really is a game changer. It is. So I wanted to tell you that I was on your website and I was just reading some of the text, and you were just talking about bringing stories. And I'm reading through the list and I got to the line that talked about the kid being bullied. And I
hmm
just got wrecked. I was crying. I couldn't even finish my research on you. Like, I had to close my laptop. I was like, that's it. Like, you have such a tender heart. And, knowing the story that you've been through of just the struggle of
hmm
everything, like all the obstacles you've overcome, you've just come
yeah,
out on top. Just such a big hearted guy that's so committed to giving other people hope and bringing that message that, hey, you can do this too. I just love
yes,
that
ma'am.
about you. I love that. So,
Thank
what's
you.
next for you, Kenneth? Do you have any? I know you coach and you speak,
hmm
and I'm going to put
hmm
all your contact in the show notes. Do you have any online courses, or how can people work with you?
They can work with me by, like I tell people, when you listen to my show, the ticket is to forward it on to someone else that could benefit from it. That's how people can work with me right now. I didn't expect the show to do as well as it's doing, so it's doing pretty good. And we are in the season. We're in season 2. I think we have like 5 or 6 episodes left this season, so we're going to go into season 3. And in season 3, I'm going to start having a lot more interaction with my audience. So we'll
Mhm.
have a lot more, people that write into the show, we give feedback to some of the things that they have. So having a day during the week that we do a feedback show. We're also going to be having new merchandise come out. So we have some adverse effect type of merchandising clothing line as far as like
Mhm.
t-shirts and mugs and stuff like that. And to give people an idea of what the adverse effect means and the type of people that we bring on the show, we have 3 tier type of people. We have the people that adversity made me, which is pretty much me. Is like the things that I went through, the things that I've had to
Mhm.
experience made me who I am, and I really embrace that and I take that on as a person. Like, hey, this is I really embody that. Then you have the people that are the adverse survivors. So I've interviewed people on the
Mhm.
show that have been survivors of molestation, been survivors of suicide, been survivors
Mhm.
of just so many other things. And we have your adversity survivors, people that have gone through some very
Mhm.
traumatic things and come out on the other side, and they're willing to share their story and talk about their pain to help someone else. And then we
Right.
have the champion survivors. And these are the people that are champions of adversity, rather, is what I want. What I'd rather say, champions of adversity. And these are people that are experts in the field, whether that be
Mhm.
mental health or something like that. These are doctors. These are people that have tons of experience, and they come on the show and give the audience and the listeners good feedback and steps on how to deal with the adversities that they deal with. So we're going to have something in the future for all those lines. I plan to actually have a conference. So there's so much in the pipe as it relates to that
Wow.
show. So I'm
That's
really excited
exciting.
about where we're going. Yeah. So we'll see
That's
how
so
we work it out.
exciting. Oh my gosh. Well, I just appreciate your time so much. I have a page worth of notes, but just the takeaways, what you shared about the human experience and the journey of self-discovery, false narratives, that was just a huge point that you made. Um,
hmm
I love how you illustrated how to get more range, and then also in depth on believing only what you know because it's based on what you've experienced. Like, this has been a wealth of information. Thank you so much. So, hey,
My
everybody,
pleasure.
you've got to just jump into the show notes below so you can connect with Ken. Hey there, right at the end, we had a little technical difficulty. So I did not have his outro properly recorded, but you can connect with Ken. Everything's listed in the show notes below. As you heard, he's an amazing thought leader. Join him on his podcast, The Adverse Effect, and you can find him at kennethcheadle.com. Again, everything's listed below. And please share this. It's really important to get that message out that no matter what hand you've been dealt with your life, or what mistakes or choices you've made that might have led you to where you don't really want to be, you can turn it around. And as always, I wish you every good thing.